Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. I'm Dr. Sarah, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with Katlin. Katlin shares with us her two birth stories. The first, a post-dates induction that ended with an unplanned emergency cesarean section. And the second, a resilient story of VBAC against what some might say all odds. If you're wanting to learn more about preparing for birth, induction, cesarean section, and VBAC, you should head over and check out our online prenatal course. Our prenatal course is rich with information that talks about preparing for birth, the birth process itself, special circumstances like VBAC itself, and tons of information about preparing for postpartum. Head on over to our website, www.shefoundhealth.ca/store to find out more. We'll start chatting with Katlin right after this.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are Sarah and Alicia, two doctor moms who are creating a community rich with high quality information to support people through the journey from pregnancy to parenthood.
Our goal is to empower with knowledge and decrease the anxieties during this time in our lives. We cover topics from fertility through the fourth trimester, with the odd birth story sprinkled in.
Come join us on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood or check us out on our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca.
Some of these podcasts have been sponsored, which allows us to continue putting out free, amazing content. But don't worry, this won't affect our advice or recommendations, and we only partner with companies we know and trust, or have come highly recommended to us by you, our listeners.
She Found Health is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information you hear does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any institution with which we are affiliated.
Katlin, I'm so excited to be speaking with you today, and I can't wait to hear your birth stories. Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to talk to you today.
So I know from our brief conversation before we started recording, you have two babies. So why don't we get started by telling me about your journey to get pregnant with your first, and we'll sort of move through from there.
Okay. So our journey to get pregnant was relatively easy. I just used an app on my phone to track my ovulation, and we got pregnant the first time we tried. So we were
not very
really, really lucky. And so I have two kids. My daughter is 4, and my pregnancy with her was pretty rough. I didn't have sickness, but I was in a lot of pain and discomfort, and it was just a really, really rough road. And then again, getting pregnant with our second, our son's just over 3 months, tracked
you look
on
amazing
an app. And
for someone with a 3-month-old and a 4-year-old. I just had to interrupt you.
Oh, thanks. I did my hair and makeup today. It doesn't happen often. So yeah, I got pregnant right away, and my son's pregnancy was just easy. And I mean, pregnancy is not easy, but in comparison to my daughter's pregnancy, it was really straightforward. And yeah, I didn't have the pain that I had. I didn't have the discomfort. It was just, I worked out, I think, until I was 38 or 39 weeks, and then stopped and just waited for him to come instead of continuing. But so they were completely different experiences. And so one of the things, so with my daughter, she was born 2 weeks late from my estimated due date. The pregnancy was hard. The delivery was hard. the labor was hard. I delivered her via emergency C-section on the morning of 2 weeks overdue. And yeah, so that whole experience was, I mean, it was, birth happens how it happens.
Mm-hmm.
A baby either comes vaginally or through your tummy, and
Absolutely.
but I don't know if I realized until later how much I didn't want it to go. I think because everything in that pregnancy was hard, and then to have that be hard and to have everything go differently than I envisioned. Not that I had a huge vision of how it would go. And so, yeah, so for her, delivery, the recovery was really hard. And it took a long time to decide whether we would want to have another baby or not because of that. I mean, once you meet your baby, nothing else matters. And
Absolutely.
we knew we wanted another one of those. It was just the process of getting there that we weren't sure if we wanted to do again.
Can I ask you a question?
So yeah.
Can you tell me about, so 2 weeks late, so you went overdue. Did you go into labor on your own, or did you have to be induced? And tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the other thing. My one thing I really wanted was, because I've had such a hard pregnancy, and even though I would never think this of anyone else, but you know how we put pressures on ourselves, and felt like my body had failed me. I just wanted it to, you think, oh, you get pregnant, your belly gets bigger, you go along with your life. And it was just so hard that I was like, how, why is this so hard? So at 12 days overdue, I started with Cervidil. I was induced with Cervidil, and didn't do much. So I did the next day another round of Cervidil. And
that's hard. 2 Cervidils?
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And so after the second round, I started having contractions, but they weren't doing anything. So they were very painful, but they weren't dilating me. I wasn't having any progress. So, but I did have enough progress to get into the hospital and have oxytocin to try to get it going more. By the morning of her being 2 weeks overdue, she was in distress. I was probably exhausted. It was time. They needed to get her out. And I think probably if it hadn't been 2 weeks overdue, if all of those circumstances hadn't have happened, maybe we could have gone and seen. But so she was delivered that morning, and both of our babies, we didn't know if they're boys or girls before. I love that. So
that's something special. Yeah.
And my actual C-section delivery experience was wonderful. I had Dr. Cooper.
Oh yeah.
And
so funny.
I just remember the whole room being really calm, and I could tell that they were smiling under their masks. It was before masks were so always worn, it was the different thing, but it was just, it was, and he held her up and got my husband to announce, and Lauren, my midwife, was at the other side of my head. And actually she took I had my camera with me, and she took it and took beautiful pictures of my daughter's delivery. And, so the actual experience was wonderful. It wasn't scary. It wasn't, it was a wonderful bringing her into the world. But I think I held on to those feelings of that my body had failed me, or that it should have, I don't know. I went through a lot of like, what if stuff when there's no answers, and I don't know that I would ever find any answers. And so I remember when I got pregnant with my son and I had the same midwives, and Lauren asked me near the end, what do you see, something like, what happened in your or what would you like to have happen differently this time? I was like, I'd like this baby to come out of my vagina. C-section.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, well, we'll see
what we can do. Yeah.
So I mean, I think I prepared myself with more knowledge this time. I remember reaching out to you guys on Instagram and watching a lot of your stuff about preparing for things that you can do to prepare for birth. And I listened to some of your VBAC podcasts because I really wanted. Yeah. And I think just really changing my mindset, like not focusing on what I wanted to have different, or what happened the first time that I didn't want to have happen, but rather like, this is a new experience, believing in my body, that sort of thing. Right. And yeah, so I did a few of the different things that are recommended, like the primrose rose oil and dates. I ate a lot of dates.
At least
the red raspberry leaf tea, like anything that I mean, I tried lots of different things with my daughter too, but this time I don't know, I just had a different mindset. I did acupuncture, like awesome.
I did too with my pregnancies. Acupuncture.
Well, and it's nice to just have, like, especially when you already have one at home, to go and have a little needle nap. You get a little break.
Oh my gosh, I think I fall asleep like every time.
Yeah, definitely. And so as you know, with VBACs, you have a consult with an obstetrician, and so we were told the different risks and how those risks are mitigated, and we really wanted it to go this way. And then also during this pregnancy, the pandemic hit, and right. I had planned things so that I could try to have my pregnancy be different than with my daughter, like having having acupuncture throughout the whole thing, having a massage therapist, attending a boot camp so that I stayed really active, all that stuff. And then all of that very quickly was taken away from me. But luckily it was just such a different pregnancy that it was okay. And I said quite a few times, I was happy that it was my second pregnancy, because I think navigating the pandemic and being a first-time mom would have been really, I don't know if I would have, for me, I feel like I wouldn't have felt as much support as I may have needed, especially just thinking back to how that pregnancy was, my first one. But anyway, so I was 38 weeks. I'm kind of rambling. Sorry.
No, it's perfect. I'm following completely. Yeah.
Okay. So then I was about 38 weeks, just under 38 weeks pregnant. And I was at a midwife appointment, and I guess my measurements had gone up enough since the last appointment that my midwife wanted to send me to make sure that my fluids weren't too much fluid. Mm-hmm. So I went for an ultrasound around 38 weeks, and my fluids were fine, or my waters. And but they guesstimated that the baby was about 8 pounds, 13 ounces. So
at 38 weeks.
Yeah. That's a big baby. And my daughter at 2 weeks overdue was only 8 pounds. So she was pretty little for 2 weeks overdue.
Yeah.
So, then I was told, it, you know, if your baby is really big, the chance of a VBAC, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And so then, yeah. And so then my due date came and went, of course, because my babies can't come on that due date or before. I was 5 days overdue and had another consult with an obstetrician. And she was lovely, and we talked about lots of things. And then at the end of the conversation, she said, so because your baby was measuring that big 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks ago at that point, I think you probably have a less than 50% chance of a VBAC. And I just started crying, and she was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be upset. And I'm like, I just don't want another C-section. Not that, you know, it's totally fine to have a baby by C-section. I just really didn't want to deliver that way. And I wanted to experience both, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a Friday. And later that day, my body spontaneously went into labor.
Yay! It was like, okay, we got you.
Yeah. And by the next day, by Saturday, I was in a bit of pain. So I went and met up with my midwives at the hospital to get some pain relief. And that obstetrician was working. And so she came in to just say how proud she was of me, which is so nice. And then I knew I was really in labor when I had morphine and Gravol, and I felt high, but in a ton of pain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't
Totally. Yeah.
But I went back home and labored at home. And my sister, I have an identical twin sister, and she came over. She's also a labor and delivery nurse, which is super helpful.
Oh, right. Does she work here?
No, she works at the Duncan Hospital right now.
Okay.
She lives here, and
cool.
she's actually pregnant now too, so she'll be having a baby in the next couple months.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, and so I came home, and then I was in a lot of pain, but I was like, I can't get into a car. Like, I can't go to the hospital. This is too painful. I can't sit in a car. So my sister came over and determined that I needed to get into the car, and we called my midwife and all that. So I also have a really good friend that's a labor and delivery nurse in Victoria named Melissa. And so she was kind of sitting on call because I think maybe she knew labor and delivery was a little bit short or something. So she was going to call in to see if they needed somebody to take an extra shift.
That's so nice.
Yeah. So I went from, in this pandemic, not knowing if my husband would even be able to be at my delivery, to getting to the hospital with my husband and my sister. And shortly after, my friend Melissa, I got an epidural. So she was my nurse through the whole thing.
Amazing.
So I got to have a good friend, my sister and my husband all there. We got to the hospital probably shortly after midnight. So this was now Sunday morning.
You know, I have chills. I'm so loving your story.
It was, to think like I wouldn't have any support, and then to be just surrounded by support. And then, so we got there just after midnight, I guess. And I was 6 centimeters dilated. So that's why I was in so much pain, because I was now in active labor. And yeah, I got the epidural shortly after getting there. And then we just kind of hung out. And then I think about maybe 3:30 or so, they checked me, and I was 10 centimeters dilated. And they said that we were just going to kind of wait and let baby descend a little bit more on its own. And at 4 o'clock, they said, do you want to start pushing? And I'm like, I guess so. And I just started pushing. And everybody said, I can't believe this is your first time pushing. Like, it's like, you know what you're doing. And I pushed for half an hour, and he was out. And
Caitlin,
it was like, the only way that I can describe it is magical. It was just, it was so and so redemptive. Like anything that I was maybe carrying from my daughter's, the way things had gone with my daughter's delivery was just gone. And it just like it, I mean, I had an epidural for one thing, but it didn't feel hard. Like it just felt like my body was doing what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it was so magical. And my midwife team had 3 women in labor that, well, I think they delivered 11 babies that in the first 10 hours of that night shift. But they had me, then 20 minutes later another lady, then 20 minutes later another lady. So my midwife wasn't even there for it. Well, I mean, one of the midwives there. Lauren wasn't there. Her student, who I got to know really well throughout my pregnancy, was there. And yeah, so it was so neat, and it was so wonderful. And to get to experience that with my sister and my good friend. I mean, I knew all along my husband would be there, but to get to have those 2 there when I didn't think that I would get to have anyone other than him. So my sister was able to take pictures while my husband was right beside me, and my other friend was doing her job, but also right beside me. And and then we were just like in such like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this magical thing just happened. It was like a couple of minutes before Melissa was like, did we see if it's a boy or a girl?
Oh yeah, I know that happens sometimes. We get so like, we're just so excited with the birth itself. Yeah.
And so,
and you guys didn't know, right? You didn't know what
we didn't know that time either. So, and then a little boy. And so that was really exciting to have one of each. And then it was just so special. Like Lauren, my midwife, said that I just need to keep telling my story because it was just such a great experience.
You know, it's so funny because I'm thinking that right now as we're chatting, because I love that your pregnancies were so different, right? There's often a fear that, you know, you were nauseous throughout your whole pregnancy and you're reluctant to get pregnant again. And your VBAC story, I think, just speaks to the power of mindset, right? Because you talked about how you prepared your mind differently, and support. Look at all those people you had supporting you, right?
Yeah.
Like, that support is so important in birth.
Yeah. Like when you have people that are like outwardly supporting you and like believing in you.
Totally.
Then it's so much easier to just not doubt yourself, right?
Totally.
And then that OB that gave me that less than 50% chance was still on. It was still her time, yes. And so she came in again to personally congratulate me and tell me how proud she was of me. So that was a really neat moment too for her, especially on such a busy night, to take time out to go and to do that. And yeah, it was just so, it was so neat. And I think just having, I don't know if maybe having my daughter's pregnancy to compare it to, also you talk about mindset, like maybe I also kind of was like, okay, I just don't want that to happen again. So this is just going to be different. And I don't know, maybe there's something to say that a pregnancy with a girl as opposed to a boy is different. I don't know. I've heard people have different sex babies and their pregnancies are exactly the same. So who knows? But
there's so much unknown, right? Honestly.
There's just so much unknown. And so it was, now we're settling into this family of 4, and our 4-year-old aggressively loves her little brother. And
Can you talk a little bit about your postpartum experience compared, you know, from your emergency C-section versus your vaginal delivery, and how those differed?
Yeah. So like, for me, my, like I said before, my recovery with my daughter after the emergency C-section was hard. It took a long time I don't know if I even felt normal when I got pregnant again, or whatever, my new normal, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
when I got pregnant again. And with my son, I had to keep reminding myself that I just had a baby and to not be doing all of the things. I mean, it was harder to just lay around all day because we have, a toddler to take care of, but it was just night and day. It was just, I felt like myself so much quicker. And I think probably also just the confidence of having done the baby thing before, maybe felt like I could take on the world. I don't know.
No,
But
honestly, we say second babies are so much easier. And I think so much of that is our mindset. You know, what
yeah,
it's terrifying for the first time taking care of a tiny human that it's entirely dependent on you.
yeah. And I think maybe you're able to give yourself a break more the second time, like lower your standards a little and know that things will happen as they happen. And but yeah, it's just been so much easier, just feeling like I can rely on my body. That might sound weird, but like it just felt like my body was more broken before. Like I would worry that that it just couldn't move properly, and now it's like and I remember one of the first days back home, when my parents looked after her, so when she was back home too, and she said, "Mommy, can you get down on the floor and get up from the floor and play with me now?" Because when I was pregnant, that was a hard thing to do, right? Getting up and down off the floor. And I was like, actually, I can. Yeah, I actually can. So, and after I had her, like getting up and down from the floor was one of the hardest things or even getting up off the couch, really, you know.
So hard. And how about your feeding journey? Did you breastfeed or did you bottle feed?
I breastfed with both, and so both times the easy things for me have been getting pregnant and breastfeeding. Those two journeys are pretty easy. I mean, not easy, straightforward. They've come together okay. I haven't struggled too much. With my son, I didn't experience the contractions when you're breastfeeding in the beginning with my daughter, and I did with my son. And
the after pains.
Yeah, I was like, this is not fair. And I definitely, I didn't get like so with my daughter, the one thing in it all, the breastfeeding was like super straightforward, super easy. This time it wasn't a challenge, but I definitely got more sore. It was like relearning. I remember one of the nurses saying, when did your daughter stop nursing? And she weaned just before her second birthday. And she said, okay, so you're used to, what you're remembering is feeding somebody who can just like sit there and latch on. You have to relearn how to, so I had to kind of relearn how to position him and so it was a bit harder than the first time, oddly enough. But it was just to relearning how to nurse somebody that is a tiny baby. And now that he's 3 and a bit months, I guess he's like 3 months and a week old, it's going fine now. But it's funny, like I find that with my second, I'm maybe more laid back, but I'm also worrying about things more. Like I didn't ever worry about my daughter gaining weight, and I'm worried about him gaining weight. And he is like massive compared to what she was. She was always very, very small. When he was a month old, I made an appointment to go weigh him at the health unit just to make sure. And he was like, I think he'd gained like 4 pounds in a month. It was ridiculous. But and I didn't have those worries. So that's been kind of weird. And I mean, it might just be because I can't do things like that. Like I can't just show up at the health unit and weigh him. I have to make an appointment. So I don't know, maybe that's why I'm not worried now because he's
Good.
probably 15 pounds, but
yeah. Maternal
yeah,
anxiety is so curious, right? The things that you worry about. Yeah. So we always ask people a few questions at the end. So what would you say the best thing that you experienced about becoming a new mom?
Well, like we were kind of talking about before you started recording, the love for sure. The moment you meet your baby is just like every friend of mine that's gotten pregnant, that's the first time mom, I'm like, I just can't wait for that moment for you. Like just that moment when everybody's, you know, you don't even notice anybody in the room. You're just like meeting this little person and that you've wondered what they look like and who they are. And then, you know, watching them grow. And I think this time just watching, my daughter's name's Miranda and my son's name's Cody, watching Miranda with Cody and just seeing, like thinking, oh, I wonder, I can't remember if Miranda did that, or, you know, oh, look at the, you know, just seeing the differences and the similarities, and then watching their little personalities develop and become these little people. And Cody's at the age now where he is starting to have a little personality, you know, starting to giggle, little things like that. And just, and then just the, like the love you feel for them, but then just like the unimaginable love that they show for you.
Yeah.
You know, catching your baby's eye and realizing they're just like gazing, you know, they're this little person that can't even sit up and they're just gazing into your eyes and you can feel the love.
So unconditional, right?
Yeah, it's just so magical.
Oh, I know. I can't agree more. Like, I remember the moment I met each of my babies. I have 3 boys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Just like warmth runs through my body when I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost makes you tear up just thinking of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And now what would you say is the hardest thing, you know, the biggest challenge you experienced becoming a new mom?
Well, with my first, it was definitely the recovery and kind of having a body that I didn't recognize, both like looking at it and how I felt. So yeah, that was really challenging, just not being able to do some of the things that felt like they should be normal things that you can do. And then this time it's been the transition of having 2 and how that's been for my 4-year-old. She was 3 when he was born. She was almost 4. And he's, you know, there's been lots of really big feelings and emotions, and those are coming out in really big ways. And friends that I have that have had 2, I've asked them, or I've shared, you know, this is my struggle, and everybody is like, oh, I remember that. And I'm like, why did nobody tell me? Nobody warned me of what this is going to be like the more challenging parts. And it's not been how I expected at all. It's not, none of it's like outward jealousy. It's, I mean, it's definitely, of course, in relation to the transition, but it's not come out in ways I had mentally prepared myself to help her through. So, you know, we continue trying to divide our time. And I think now that Cody's getting a bit more interactive, it's more fun for Miranda than just watching mom hold this baby. Yeah. So, yeah, that's been the most challenging. And yeah, just trying, you know, like not having enough hands to be everywhere that you need to be. And definitely lowering my standards. If we watch movies all day long, that's what we do all day long. And I'm really lucky and fortunate because my husband took some of the leave. And so he's actually been off this whole time. He goes back to work on Monday.
That's
So
wonderful.
so he's been feeding us and doing everything that he can while I am doing the breastfeeding or whatever, you know, and he takes Miranda out for fun things, or will, you know, hang out with Cody so I can go do things with her. And so I'm a little bit nervous for next week when I'm on my own, but I also know I'm so fortunate that I've had that time, and I have a really great support system with my in-laws and my parents. It's just during this lockdown, I obviously don't have that. So
COVID has been tough, right?
Yeah.
And then one final question, and we didn't talk about this before, but has your sort of how you envisioned your future or career, or, you know, your sort of life trajectory changed from what you thought it would be, you know, before you're a mom to after becoming a mom?
I guess in a way, not with my career, but I think the changes in my life, things that matter before just don't matter. You know, if I don't get a moment to myself, or I don't get to do this or that, it's less important. I think the biggest change in my life is that it's just not my life anymore. It's, you know, it's about them, and that's good and not good, because I still have to be myself. But I have to refine what my hobbies are. I guess I have to. So those have been put on the back burner, but prior to having kids, I may have thought that would, I'd struggle with that, but I'm okay with that having to be on the back burner right now. And I think just, the biggest change is that I identify as a mom. Not Caitlin, but a mom.
I know. No, and I think that happens to all of us, and we can sometimes get lost in that, right? So as your kids get bigger, remembering who we are, right? Because it's funny, like, you think about when you introduce yourself, like I introduce myself as a physician and a mom, but like, who's Sarah, right? So who's Caitlin? And I think that's something that we sometimes forget, how important it is to remember who inherently we are and what makes us us, right?
And maybe that's totally changed. Like, I don't think that the things that would have made me before are what make me now, but figuring out what those things are. And I think, well, I guess like career-wise, I'm a social worker. I work in the social work field, and how readily available I used to be has changed. So that's, I'd say how my career path has changed. I don't bring my work phone home as often, those kinds of things.
That's a good thing, right?
I just don't have the time for it. So, and especially after this, and with my daughter, there was just the 1 year mat leave at that time, and I wasn't ready to go back. So that, I guess, is one way it changed. Luckily I work at the most supportive place on the planet, I think. And so I was encouraged to just pick a time when I felt like I could come back then. So I went back when she was 17 months. And this time I just didn't even mess around. I took the 18 months and I'll go back. I'll go back. So I guess that's sort of, and you know, maybe if I didn't work at such an incredibly supportive place, things would have changed. But I think it's partly my workplace that we're very family oriented, and so it makes it really easy to stay on the path of working.
That's wonderful. That's so great. Oh, Caitlin, thank you so much for sharing your story. I love your VBAC story, honestly, and I think it's so empowering for other women and other pregnant people to hear this, because and the thing that I always try and tell people about statistics is that they apply to a population, not the individual, right? So at a population level, you had a less than 50% chance, but you still had that, like, you fell into that 40% or 30% or whatever, right? And like, go you.
Thanks. it was really fun to get to tell my story on your podcast and to have this little Zoom call with you. And I love following you guys on Instagram. I think it's so wonderful, the amount of effort that you put into that, when I'm sure you're incredibly busy people. It's just, I think I've gotten a lot of answers from watching your looking at your Instagram, watching your stories, your YouTube, your podcast. And throughout my pregnancy, I've often asked you guys questions and you always got back to me. And, you know, I just think that's really helpful and really special that you guys do that, like I say, because I'm sure you don't have all the free time to do that. So,
no, but you know, we're so passionate, and I think what we want is for people to have access to reliable information and to feel empowered going into their birth, right? Like, you prepared yourself, and look at the outcome you got, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. No,
Yeah.
it's so wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katlin.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.